And now, it's time for TJwow.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody, depending on where in the world you are, and also very much about when you're listening to this recording. We hope you enjoy yourselves. What we're doing today, well, this is me. I'm your deputy editor, Jo Cook, and it's my job to facilitate this conversation, and hopefully we will have a good one. We think conversation is really important, and this quote from the late, great J. Cross really highlights it. Often we talk about learning technologies and we talk about the best way to do things, and we think one of those best ways is conversation, and that's what we focus on here today. There's no presentations, it's all about the chat. So if you are just joining us, welcome, and use that chat window. Use it to link with each other, to have a conversation, to ask all sorts of questions and make comments about what's going on, and to generally get involved. At the bottom of the screen, we've also got a question and answer panel. So have a look at that question and answer panel. If you've got a question that you are desperate to make sure that we see, pop it in there. I do a fairly good job of the chat window, but if you definitely want me to have a look at the question, pop it in there and I will do my best. Also, you can join us on TJwow. Our John, who is our editor, will be tweeting away. So any little thoughts, any nuggets you're taking away, do go and share them with your followers on TJwow. And so do get involved in all of those thoughts. That would be really great. All of our sessions are recorded. As I say, you can access all of those previously. No sign up, no registration needed, all sorts of amazing topics, and go and look at those in the future. And now I think it's probably about time we found out about our speakers this month. We have Pam, Sundar and Lizzie, and I'm going to bring their webcams on screen now and get them to introduce themselves so that we can find out a little bit more about them. So here we go, our lovely panel this month. So let's start with Pam, then Sundar, then Lizzie. So Pam, let's get you unmuted first of all. And Pam, tell us a little bit about what it is that you do in this kind of coaching arena, because it's quite an interesting story. Oh, now Pam, we can't hear you. Gosh, we always do test this ahead of time, everybody, I promise. So Pam, you look unmuted to me, but just double check on the computer that you're unmuted.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. There we go. Minor technical blip, but we got over it. So Pam, tell us who you are and what you do in this kind of coaching and mentoring world.
Thank you, Jo. So my name's Pam Bateson. I'm CEO and founder of a digital coaching, mentoring and training platform. We provide on-demand access to digital coaching and humans, and we combine some very clever tech at the back end. So we record, transcribe, analyse and understand what are the key things that impact people in work, and we use that information to inform society and government on areas that they need to pay attention to.
Wow, so that's pretty impressive. Thank you very much, Pam. We'll come back to you shortly. So Sundar, tell us a little bit about what it is that you do.
Hi everyone, good to be here. My name is Sundar Ramachandran. I work for GlaxoSmithKline. I'm based in Mumbai, India. I'm the general manager for training, so I have a very specific focus on helping our sales managers coach better. So that's my context for why this is an interesting conversation. And I'm invested in how sales coaching and sales mentoring specifically can improve our commercial outcomes. So that's what I do. Thank you.
Thank you, Sundar. So another little minor technical blip. Your sound isn't coming out as well as it was when we tested it earlier on today. So I don't know if you've changed anything or can have a go through anything. I'll put some notes in a private chat for you in a moment, see if we can get that a little bit better. But Sundar works for GlaxoSmithKline. I've pasted his contact details in there. So thank you very much for that. And there's some advice coming through on the chat window for you, Sundar. And Lizzie, let's get you unmuted. Let's come back to you and see if we can find out a little bit more about you. So Lizzie, let me just unmute you. There we go. Oh, we're having fun today, aren't we? Lizzie, I can't hear you either. I promise everybody we do test things ahead of time. Yes, Lizzie, let's go.
All right, yes. So I do individual and team coaching, facilitate and consult, and I have been in the world of helping organisations, teams and individuals reach high performance and ongoing success for a number of years. So my passion is really trying to get to the heart of the challenges and perhaps the frictions of what people are at, and really trying to move them on with progress, utilising a number of different skill sets, one of which is coaching and mentoring.
Thank you very much. So Sundar, let's see how your audio is working now, see if it's a little bit better.
Yeah, I don't know what's wrong, but hey, I hope you guys can hear me a little better now.
That is much better, I think. So Sundar, just reintroduce yourself again, just in case people didn't catch it last time.
Yes, happy to do that. So I work for GlaxoSmithKline in Mumbai, and I'm the manager of training for the India business. I'm responsible for ensuring that our managers, use sales coaching as a lever to improve commercial outcomes, and therefore I'm very invested in how coaching, but sales coaching specifically, actually has an impact on the commercial outcomes of the business. So that's what I bring to the table. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sundar. So 3 really great speakers. Let's find out from Lizzie, then Sundar, then Pam, just a couple of thoughts to start us off on our conversation today about that question about how can coaching and mentoring impact business results. And I'm going to throw in, can it? Just to be kind of balanced about that. I think the answer is going to be yes, but let's see what everybody comes up with. So Lizzie, what are your first thoughts on how can coaching and mentoring impact business results?
Okay, so there's 3 areas that I'll just bring up today. I mean, there's obviously a number, and it's pertinent around the individual and the coaching and the context they're in, but one is around focus. So the great thing about coaching and mentoring, it really focuses in on the situations and the challenges of the individuals that they actually have, and so you can focus on that rather than pick something perhaps off the shelf or something that might be 40 or 60% of what you're trying to do. The second thing is about clarifying goals. So much of what goes on in our lives, we tinker at the top of our conscious minds, and actually by doing some kind of coaching, it really allows you to get to what are your true goals and what you're actually trying to achieve. What is your purpose and how you're going to get there. And the third thing is around getting stronger teams. So if you as individuals have a better understanding of where you're trying to get to as individuals and also cohesively as a team, it's amazing how much you can achieve so much quicker because you can see that direction and you can create that trusting environment that allows you to get the accountability and the results you're wanting to get.
Brilliant. Thank you, Lizzie. Lots of really important keywords I can hear coming out of that. Thank you. So in the chat window, feel free to comment on these things, ask questions, throw in your own thoughts about these questions as well. Sundar, let's come to you. What are your first thoughts on this point about how can coaching and mentoring impact business results?
Oh, I think straight off, I think it has a huge impact. In large enterprises like the ones that I work for, a lot gets said and done, in terms of business strategy. Things keep changing. And I think what really coaching does is it provides an opportunity for, employees at large to have a meaningful, reflective conversation with their managers. And you actually get to see how your initiatives are landing on the ground, how people feel about them, the difference that the initiatives actually make. And also, I think coaching conversations provide an opportunity for employees to speak up, reflect with a trusted partner and advisor, and actually shapes the culture overall that we are building. But on the commercial side, I think what coaching also informs is it's a great tool to actually get a sense of where people really need help. Specific to sales coaching, which I'm responsible for, I think you get a lot of interesting insights on what's working and what's not. And that actually is great feedback for us in the way we design and deliver learning programs. So I look at coaching both as a remedial tool, but also as a performance improvement tool, which actually feeds back in terms of what we should be focusing on.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sundar. And Pam, that's presumably some similar stuff to what you do as well. So what are your thoughts on this opening question of how can coaching and mentoring impact business results?
So I've been an executive coach for 25 years. I've run a business for 23 years providing executive coaches And it's universal that people come out of a coaching session and feel great. They feel that they have clarity, purpose, direction, motivation. There's a real sense of impact. But on the flip side of the coin, quite often coaching hasn't been evaluated. Organisations don't know what people use coaching for, and they found it hard to kind of really understand the meta insights that can be drawn from saying, okay, so we know that people are enjoying it, we know that people value it, but what is the value of money that, what's the value that we get back into our organisation? And, I was talking to a big global organisation only about 4 or 5 weeks ago, and their coaching spend was over £1 million last year on the senior management team on executive coaching, and people had the freedom to buy how many sessions they wanted, to work with the same coach, and in some cases people had worked with the same coach for years and years and years. So whilst people value coaching and people have an expectation to coaching now, and we know it does impact business performance, I think the flip side is that it's still too invisible, it's not highly measured, and it doesn't inform strategic direction. So there has to be a process that's designed in where organisations become better at learning from those conversations.
Thank you, Pam. And Hannah says, wow, can I go and work for them? What a budget. But something you say there, Pam, is I think you said that was for maybe senior executives. So how does this work a little bit more for everyone in the company, not just the C-suite or the senior executives?
Yeah, well, we know that there's a real drive as, one of the core leadership and managerial skills that organisations want to bring through is leader as a coach, and bringing the coaching narrative and inquiry-based conversations into the workplace. So, it's an essential characteristic of the type of democratised learning experience that people want to provide. There's less appetite in the society that we live in, where we have Netflix and Amazon Prime. There's less appetite for lengthy training courses, and people want speed, and they want it fast, and they want it on demand, and they want it in their hand, and they want the type of learning intervention that is intuitive and can respond to what their needs are. So on one hand, managers have a responsibility to provide that, and leaders have a responsibility to provide that as the context. But there's also an expectation as kind of, millennials start to represent 50% of the workforce. They expect that type of conversation with their boss, and they want to work in purpose-led businesses, and people have to kind of connect around kind of people's values, and they have to feel included. So, the businesses that don't embrace coaching as their way of leading, are sure to kind of not be able to attract the best talent that there are.
I think you make a great argument for that. I'm sold, absolutely. And Hannah says in the chat window, democratise learning experience. Like that term. Yeah, I think that's a good one, Hannah. Thank you. Sundar, let's come to you on a question from Jerome in the chat window. Jerome says, people believe in the values of coaching. What are your experiences where companies believe, but unfortunately the barrier of not enough time seems to get in the way, as numbers are more important, i.e. the need to make money hits the targets and keeps the shareholders happy? Now, Sundar, your team won an award at the Training Journal Awards last year.
Right? But I think the way to look at so that's always the challenge when you work for a large enterprise. The commercial outcomes always come first. But I think the way you need to look at this is it's not an either or, right? And it requires a combination of both push and pull. What I mean specifically by that is you got to work at building a culture of coaching, which essentially means you got to have the leadership, as Pam mentioned, a role model. What good coaching looks like, and also the leadership should actually engage in storytelling about their experiences of having been coached as well. I think that sets the right tone within the enterprise. But at the same time, you also need to keep going back to the larger organization and talk about the benefits that people have experienced who've gone through coaching, right? So what does success look like? How have people been performing as a consequence of a coaching intervention, or have they been able to move up within the organization because of the coaching they may have received? So it's an ongoing journey. There is no silver bullet, but I think if when an organization commits itself and the leaders commit themselves to creating a culture of coaching and you stay invested in the journey, I think you do see results in the short to medium term.
Thank you very much, Sundar. And Lizzie, let's come to you now and just think about this point around around those results and around the business need. Tell us a bit more, Lizzie, about how people find out the business need, how they link what they want to the business, and so on.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's very relevant to the context which people are in, and it can be either driven. So there's a number of different businesses, and it can be the context of a broader program in learning and development, and it becomes a real focused opportunity. So there's a lot of words people are talking about this individualized approach, and this is where coaching really comes into its own, because it allows people to have, yes, there's a flavour, so you might have some leadership training and then have coaching as really part of that, and that's often where people get the most benefits of that. So it's very personalised, so how people are moving from one role to the next and having a measure of success of how many people have moved from that position up. From a team perspective, it can be, as Sundar has already pointed out, it could be a performance issue and people moving from being underperforming to performing, so it's a relatively straightforward. There's other areas that I've used in the past, I'm shortly going to be using again, is around very much a career perspective. So people recognising in business the nature of the future skills. So many people are in roles at the moment that those roles won't exist in 5 years' time, but the business really recognise that, and so there's two options they want to do. They want to upskill, and they also want to give people the opportunity to look at further afield. So there's a career aspect. So people are recognising on that perspective, how do you get the return? How do you got or return or intention that some people are talking about? And I don't know what the others feel about this. Rather than return or investments and return or intention, and by having that intention, you clearly understand what that's, whether it's the individual, the team, or the organisation. So you're really focusing around that rather than necessarily hooking on some, a tangible piece. On another perspective, you might be in a sales organisation where the black and white is more straightforward as to see how that comes across. When you're doing it individually, people often come, and there's some of the three areas that I spoke about at the beginning. People want more focus, and they've got so much stuff going on, actually, and as Pam rightly points out, people will go away usually with just a whole different feeling when they've had their coaching, and with that comes focus and allowing them to make the progress they're trying to make. And having that clarity can also allow people to get the progress they're wanting to get much quicker. So it can be in monetary terms, it can be in an intention perspective, so depending on their goals. And you can actually allocate, there's various ways of doing, you can look at it and say, right, in relation to what's happened, what is the reaction, what is the behaviour impact on that, and what is the impact of that perhaps to a financial figure as well. They're just a few areas you can look at.
Yeah, some really great stuff in there, Lizzie. Thank you so much. And some stuff going on in the chat window around that. So if you're new to our live video discussion, then do get involved in the chat if you want to. You're more than welcome to sit back and listen as well. But we encourage you to share your thoughts and questions. It's a place for everyone to get involved if you want to. And we don't worry about typos, Emma. Spelling and typing live online do not count. It doesn't matter. It's a bit like calories when you're on holiday, something like that. So what have we got going on in the chat window? Emma says it's tricky to get stakeholders to buy into coaching and mentoring mentality because maybe they don't understand it and cannot see the direct return on investment. And that return on investment point is actually quite interesting. We've done some work at TJ recently about that term. We had an interview with Ajay Pangakar about it, and we've got some more coming up. And there's a lot of disparity around how return on investment is used in a business and fiscal sense and how we're using it on in L&D. So Lizzie, I really like that return on intention. That's a really good way to look at it. And Hannah says, it depends on what sort of coaching. If it's sales, maybe it's more easy to measure. So we're back to that kind of measuring point. And that conversation is ongoing in the chat window, so do get involved with that. Pam, let's come to you on a question from Richard Gadd. He said, Pam suggested that coaching was not always evaluated. How might learners, customers and suppliers measure impact?
People need help for the thing that they need to address in the next week or two. Mostly measurement is most visible when somebody's got something coming up and they need the help to be able to resource themselves. We use digital to be able to measure the impact. So we listen to conversations and we iterate and learn from all of those conversations to be able to understand what's consuming people in the workforce. And we use that to feed business process improvement ideas to the board so that they can pay attention to the things that are most consuming their people. So we tell them what's enabling them, what's blocking them, what their learning needs are and what their comms needs are. But a lot of people want relevant content. They want that personalised experience. So one of the ways in which you measure, I think, is for learners to feel as though what they're talking about and the things that are inhibiting their performance can be seen in visible actions from the senior leadership team. So you have to connect the organisation and you have to drive for business process improvement at the same time as you ask people to be better in their work. But I think the move for all of this on evaluation is for, this could be a little bit contentious, forgive me, is for external coaches to stop being the people that are brought in to fix people internally. There's a big move to in-housing learning and to creating many more internal coaches, mentors, experts that can share and facilitate their learning across the whole of the organisation. So, for example, you know, there's two of the biggest organisations in the world that I've spoken to recently that have a full strategy that within 5 years they'll stop working with any external consultants or coaches, and their whole strategy is based on in-housing learning and making it effortless and easy for people to find, book, connect and have conversations with everybody in the business, and creating this full learning economy where everybody every week has something to teach to somebody and something to learn from somebody. And so you kind of make it everybody's responsibility to facilitate the learning and the development of another person, and you encourage that impulse for people to lean in and to kind of talk to other people in the organisation to find that. And I think that helps with managing silos. It helps to kind of make an organisation more agile. People think in fast sprints of 10 and 20-minute conversations rather than 1 hour conversations. And it's in that context that you start to be able to see daily productivity being changed and creativity and innovation coming through.
That's a huge amount in there to unpack, and some great comments in the chat window about it. Emma says, I think that's a very important point, Pam. People see it as a way to fix things. I think there needs to be a huge move to in-house learning. And I think, Pam, you know, you don't say that lightly because that's your business, isn't it, is external coaching?
This isn't. You know, we do provide on-demand access to coaches, but, you know, our strategy is to provide a communication platform that every single employee can access and book and find somebody within their own organisation and take a quick conversation, and for that then to turn into conversations for good that affect business process improvement. You know, my background is as a lean engineer. You know, I've worked in organisations where, you know, there are millions of conversations that are just wasted and lost and just go into the ether. How many times do we sit in meetings and we think, oh my God, please don't make me discuss this again? You know, we're a year on and we're still talking about the same thing. You know, we have to make conversations come to improving the workplace. And, you know, in a dispersed organisation, in a deskless society, you know, it's even more important that there's a way to capture and learn from everything that people are either wanting to implement, wanting to change or struggling with. And that work, you know, if it's done with a coach, should be with today's tech, you know, we should be able to listen and learn from that and do something to inform leadership action.
Very well said, Pam. Really like that. And there's different viewpoints coming through in the chat, obviously. Hannah says, I think there's always a role for external, new perspectives and confidentiality, but I like the idea behind this. John has shared the podcast interview with Ajay Pankar that I mentioned about return on investment. Jerome talks about internal culture and external coaching, which is excellent. And Mike Lightbulb says, I think there's merit to both. I see where Pam is coming from. Internal expertise and coaching, but potentially bringing an external expert for top-down advice. So it's all about kind of where you're using which bit of those tactics. And Emma says, I think external help is important from the top down, as the top people may respect external coaches more. Shame though, as they possibly have the internal support. There's all different ways that this can be done, and opportunities, which is absolutely great. Let's move on to a kind of develop this conversation a little bit more. So Sundar, a question for you, and this is actually from Alok. And Alok says, how to build a leadership appetite for coaching. So some leaders absolutely get this, Sundar.
Yeah, I think one straightforward way to do this is to ensure that the leaders actually have experienced what it means to be coached. So often I use the term within the enterprise that it has to be a lived experience. So I'm a big believer in coaching because I'm a product of good coaching. I've used coaching as a lever to fix my blind spots, but also to accelerate in my career. So I totally get it, how it actually benefits an individual. Oftentimes, leaders either haven't experienced what effective coaching looks like, or they haven't experienced coaching at all, right? And this is particularly a problem as leaders get more senior within the enterprise. So I think just as part of building high potential leaders in large enterprises, you got to ensure that you build in an appreciation for coaching at the right time. And this could be a combination of putting them through a coaching experience themselves. And also I want to build on what Pam said earlier about, internal coaches. So for example, at GSK, we have a very well established program. We call it Job Plus Coach. And what that essentially is a network of internal coaches across the world who can be made available on demand to colleagues across the globe as well. So it's not uncommon for somebody in India to be coached by somebody in China or in the UK or the US. Uh, and the community of coaches is available to support everybody. So I think there are things that large organizations and small and medium organizations can do internally as well to really bring that culture of coaching. And I did want to make a quick comment about the KPIs because I can see on chat that clearly there's a belief that obviously it's easier to measure in sales coaching. But I think what you can do within an enterprise context is to identify the business outcomes you want to impact. So, and then see how you want to link that to a coaching intervention. So this could be, so as an example, if you're really, using coaching as a lever to help somebody transition into a new role, then you could look at how they transition over a 30, 60, 90 period. That could be a great KPI to measure. You could be using coaching as a lever to accelerate somebody into a higher role or to help somebody move into a different geography within the business as an example. And again, these are all quick KPIs to measure. So I think the starting point before you really embark on creating a coaching culture or a coaching journey is to understand what outcomes you're trying to impact. That's the first question you ought to be asking. And then you get onto the journey, and then you can draw the connection back and say, have you been successful? So I think that's one way of putting a little more structure around launching a coaching program or improving a coaching program within an enterprise context.
Thank you, Sundar. Again, some really great points and good positive feedback in the chat window. I can see Pam and Lizzie nodding away there as well. And I think what you really focus on there is something we talk about on our TJwow webinars a lot and in TJ more generally, is making sure it's linked to the business outcome. Coaching generally, it's going to be generally good, but if you can specify who, what, why, when, and link it, like you say, then that's going to be really important. Lizzie, let's change tact very slightly on this because we've got a great question has come in from Nikki Forster. So thank you, Nikki, for your question in the Q&A pod. Nikki says, it's interesting that so far we're only using the term coaching. I'd like to hear more about how mentoring is implied within coaching or used in a separate approach.
Okay, it depends how purist you are on the world of coaching. So I guess the number of ways that I've used it, you can have the pure end of coaching where it's very much questioning and allowing the coachee to very much drive that conversation. You're just pure guiding it by the questioning which you're doing about it. And that allows very much the coachee to be very much in the driving seat, and you can allow that to happen. It becomes really individualized. However, in some coaching conversations, there is a real opportunity to, and often, I get asked as a coach, well, what would you suggest? And although it can break the conversation, it's an opportunity for them to hear your perspective. So it's a very clear thing. And people like the, sort of the kind of professional bodies on this would very much try and keep the two separate, but there is an occasion to do that, and that is very much due to the circumstances which they're in. I'm sure Pam will have a comment on this, but in relation to how you pull those together. Now, I've just picking up what Sundar said earlier, and also Pam, I've run mentoring programs across Europe for a large technical organisation, and the mentoring piece was completely separate from other conversations, but it really helped to drive sort of career opportunities, innovation, and also progress within what people are doing, because just really by making those connections, you really got progress that allow things to move on quickly. And the subtle things and those kind of implied things, so the internal intention for the individual might have all those three things embedded there, but actually from a business perspective, when you're trying to get leaders' involvement in that, you know, people find it hard to make those tangible connections, but actually subtly they make very different. So mentoring conversations is much more, you're in the kind of the suggesting opportunity that people can put your own perspective from your own experience and knowledge. And coaching tends to be more at the other end of the spectrum, where you can utilise very much the knowledge and skills of individuals already got, and very much be driven by the coachee. So hopefully that's answered some of the question.
Thank you very much. Now, Sundar, in the chat window, you put, when you are coaching for performance outcomes, it's often a blend of coaching and mentoring. Tell us a bit more about what your thoughts are, Sundar, and then we'll have a chat with Pam.
Yeah, so you know, I wouldn't sort of really you know, wire myself too much into the terms, and I agree with Lizzie that depending on, you know, what you're referring to, everybody has a different definition. But if you look at within an enterprise context, and if you want your managers to be really role modeling coaching, it's often going to be a combination of, you know, very Socrative type of a discussion when you're leading with questions, but also sometimes, you know, being a little prescriptive, which sort of falls more into the mentoring definition, if you will. You know, I'm not too fussed about what terms you use, but what we're really saying is you want your internal managers to really embrace a culture of ongoing performance conversations, which would include a combination of helping them figure out their own solutions, which is sort of coaching by its definition, but also sometimes, you know, giving them a nudge, you know, helping them discover a solution as well from a set of options, which could be sort of more mentoring. So I think it's really a combination, especially when done by an internal manager, right? And then you could also have more exploratory coaching, which is typically done more by external coaches who are hired for very specific purposes. So I think that's the key difference that I see. But for me, it's a blended model when I'm encouraging my internal managers to do it.
Some really good stuff there. Thank you, Sundar, for your take on that. And Pam, you put in the chat window, we treat mentoring as profession-centered development and coaching as
the important thing in coaching is if it's the internal community that are coaching one another, you have to break a habit. You know, a lot of managers believe that they are bought to give people ideas and give people solutions and give people answers. And so you create a culture of high dependency where people come to a manager and say, I'm stuck, what do I do? And a manager gives them the answer. And whilst managers and mentors do need to give answers and equip people with the technical and functional expertise to be able to do their profession, the reason why I believe, you know, in the early days, you know, we trained coaching in the way that we did in a very purist way, was to unlearn the habit of always giving the quick answer, always giving the shortcut. And we were in pursuit of creating a much more interdependent culture where the instinct was to inquire first and give an answer second if really somebody's back was against the wall and they didn't know how to do it. So when we're training coaches and mentors, we do still say, don't give any solutions, don't give any answers. Just notice what can happen if you believe an individual's expertise is enough, and if the expertise that you need to be able to make improvement lies within your organisation. And until you start to find that and experience it in a conversation and believe that if you trust and if you value, you know, you can unlock kind of many more ideas than you believe are there, then you always kind of create that very dependent type of interaction. So, you know, we do position mentors to impart technical and functional expertise. And whilst our method in our business is, we call it coaching with content, and all of our coaches are trained to use both coaching and mentoring, we do always say believe in the expertise that lies within an organisation and pull that out first.
That sounds excellent. Thank you, Pam. And Nikki has said thanks for these answers, much appreciated. And so let's kind of build on some of the things that have been picked up here. Lizzie, tell us what are your thoughts about what the key competencies are required for leaders to be effective coaches? And this is another great question from Alok. Oh, Lizzie, you're muted, so just remember to click that microphone icon. So it's great to be muted because then we don't get all the background sounds.
Yeah,
but
so
we definitely want to hear from you now, Lizzie.
Fundamental skills. I mean, Pam picked up a lot of things there and very eloquently said, you know, you've got to be really careful as a manager, leader, not to impose on what your ideas are and allow people very much be empowered to be able to do what they need to do. So really, you know, the basics of both, I would argue, both the mentoring and coaching is all about questioning and listening and very much allowing that conversation to be led around that. So they're really key starting points. I think the other thing is it does pick on, you know, what is your starting point? You know, Sundar referred to, you know, performance coaching. If it's performance coaching, are you using a particular style and what style particularly that organisation is wanting to achieve? Because of different organisations are going to want different results from these things. Some are much more performance orientated and therefore the blend, as Sundar referred to, is a much more blend of coaching and mentoring. Others, it's a more an element where people very much want to make the most of what they've got and start to get some more belief and confidence behind them. And by purely walking away from a coaching session, having had that, can really help. So going back to the question about leaders, really listening in the right question is a really great place to start. I think the other thing is you as leaders, what kind of, which Pam alluded to at the beginning, what kind of style of leadership are you wanting within the organisation and how does that follow through? So you've got to really identify those behaviours and skill sets behind that. And how you orchestrate that, whether you're giving a presentation, whether you're actually a one-to-one conversations, or how you're driving teams, and that level of questioning. So really trying to build in, whether it's, let's say, for example, autonomy. If you're really wanting autonomy, as long as people understand the bounds of which they're working, it's allowing them to feel that they have got that, and therefore careful questioning and building confidence through questioning can be a really great place to start, just as one small example.
Really love that, Lizzie. Thank you. And I know in the development of my skill as manager or lack thereof as a manager, it took me a while to go from I'm in charge and telling you what to do to kind of I trust you. I brought you here for a reason. And you know what you do might be different from how I do it, but you're doing great and it means I don't have to do it. So that empowering and enabling and trusting was really key. Pam, what are your thoughts on this about what the competencies are
that they've got to get
for leaders
all,
and managers
you know,
to be effective coaches?
Stand at the side, stop being the script writer, you know, set a direction and then let people do it. You know, we talk about make it up and make it happen in our business. We say to everybody, you know, if you just do it, right? We trust you, we believe in you. So I would tell people to get off centre stage and create the types of conversations. You know, I think that the thing that's most craved in the workplace is that people want a good listening to. You know, we're not short of ideas. You know, as a lean engineer, I'd go into many businesses and the first thing that I would do is ask everybody what are we getting wrong and what's the thing that's going to fix it. And, you know, I could always pull out 5 to 10% of cost and improve organisations simply by taking the things that the staff were looking at management that we were doing on a day-to-day basis and saying, that's stupid. There's a better way of doing this. So just get off centre stage, listen to your people and let them do it. You know, the best project manager in the world is the person who came up with the idea, because they don't put the project down, they make it happen, they follow it through, they articulate it well, they're passionate about it. You know, and find the thing that people are passionate about in their jobs. Ask people, what do you come to work for? Do you come to work for a career? Do you come to work because it's a job? Or do you come to work because you're passionate about something? Find people's passions and let them craft their job in the way that they want to craft it. You know, so I think the job is to facilitate an individual being brilliant.
Oh, I love that. Thank you, Pam. And I really like that point about get off centre stage and listen to people. We've all been in jobs where we look up the hierarchy and think, really? So how was that decision made? What is going on? And in the chat, I asked whether people are using reverse mentoring. And Hannah said that they are, in a previous organisation, they use LGBT, lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender mentoring. And also there was a female reverse mentoring as well, where people partnered with senior managers to discuss what it's like where they are. And somebody else said they used reverse mentoring as well. Jane used reverse mentoring in a previous organisation. Very beneficial for senior leaders to hear from people at lower grades. And if anybody's ever watched Back to the Floor or Undercover Boss or anything like that, whilst that might not be about coaching per se, it's asking questions and it's finding out from the people that are doing the work. That's all brilliant. Hannah says it's easier to do that in a small organisation to craft the jobs. So some really good stuff there about what can we do, how can we change things. Now, Sundar, you put into the chat window that you think we're also moving into.
Yeah, and again, this is really building on the whole aspect of what are the competencies required to be effective coaches. I know there is a school of thought, which is really around you don't need to know the domain to be a good coach as long as you know how do you ask the right questions. But I think increasingly what I'm seeing within the enterprise context is there is a lot of short-termism that is creeping in. People want results here and now. And how do you really balance that commercial levers that are driving you to think short-term and deliver now with, having the traditional style of coaching, which would deliver results mid to long term, as an example. And for that reason, I'm seeing a lot of the internal managers who are actually player coaches get more success. So folks who have the ability to not only ask the right questions, but also have a very, deep understanding of the business context. And therefore, what that means is increasingly I'm finding coaches have to invest in finding out what is the business context, what is the ecosystem in which you're solving the problem, in addition to having all of the listening skills, ability to reflect, ability to ask deep, meaningful questions. I think you need to now also keep your eyes and ears open, but also have a very strong business acumen to be an effective coach, especially if you happen to be an internal coach. So that's a business acumen is a key competency that I think is becoming increasingly.
On the flip side of that, businesses need to tell their employees what their priorities are and what the sense of travel is. And, there's quite a lot of businesses that don't see the importance of saying, this is our common purpose this year. This is what we've got to be obsessed with. How can you play a part?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask one last really quick question to Sundar. It's a really quick one before we go into our reflection. Sundar, Richard Gadd said, in my opinion, and in an ideal world, there's two very big caveats to this at the very beginning, every new employee would receive effective workplace induction. In addition, I'd suggest that this is the responsibility of line managers and leaders to develop all staff. Sadly, this rarely happens, and so we call for coaching and mentoring. Sundar, is that the key to the problem? Is coaching fixing that problem, or is coaching and mentoring actually a whole different thing for a whole different reason?
I think the key problem, the way I see it, is it is a style of leading teams, right? So if you think of coaching and mentoring as a leadership style, as the way you operate as a leader, as the way you work, as the way you get things done, then it's embedded in who you are and what you say and what you do, right? The problem begins when you start separating coaching from your role as a people manager and leader. So you say, well, my job is to just manage performance and I'll bring in somebody else to coach, right? You cannot outsource that. So it's way too important for it to be outsourced. Every leader, every manager has to own the accountability for coaching and leading their teams. And I think that has to be set as a work ethic and culture within the enterprise. So, I sort of say within the organization that coaching is way too important to be left only to the coaches. So everyone's got to do it. Everyone's got to own it. I mean, that's your job as if you're a manager, your core job is to coach your people.
Thank you, Sundar, and Pam and Lizzie were nodding away there. And so Richard, your thoughts on that question, welcome in the chat window. What we are going to do now is we're going to move into some reflection time and think about what are we actually going to do with this conversation after today. Our speakers are staying here. They are not going anywhere. They are still involved and going to be chatting, but we are going to be coming off webcam and use a whiteboard instead. So speakers, let's just wave a visual goodbye for a moment. And let's move into our reflection time. So we're going to have a quick practice with the tools first of all. So please have a look on the screen. What you should be able to see is a text tool. So if you go and have a click on the T text tool, it should be on the left of your screen. What you should be able to do from there is click on the screen, type in your name, click once again, and what you should be able to do then is everybody be able to share their name. So if you have any problems with that, do let me know, but let's get that going. If you're on a mobile device, there is no T text tool, but you can use the chat window. So thank you, Nikki. Thank you, testing, Hannah, Kate, Jerome, Charlotte, Emma, Lizzie. Absolutely brilliant. Now, if any of you type on top of each other, do not worry. Some of you have found already there's a move tool. So that very first tool in your toolbox looks like an arrow. You can pick things up and move them. So you can move your writing or other people's writing. So let's make sure we've all had a go at this, and you can delete things as well. So be careful. We don't want to delete everybody's writing, because we do want to hear from people. But it looks like a number of you have got this working. If you're having troubles, let me know in the chat window. And also you can write in the chat window and I'll happily share it on the whiteboard as well. So let's move into our actual question. So we've had lots of discussion today, lots of stuff shared, some really great points that have come up. What is it you are actually going to do after today? So grab that text tool, find a space on the screen, and don't worry if you type over the top of someone. And you can put your name there, you can leave it anonymous if you prefer. But what's your action point? What are you thinking? This is what I'm going to do after today. So it could be immediately, it could be tomorrow, it could be next week. What is it that you are thinking that you are going to be doing after today? So if it's not working too well for you, you can always put something in the chat window and I will go and pop that onto the screen for you. That's no problem at all. So just go and share some ideas there. So I've just resynced them, that still resyncs the screen. Hopefully if you had any problems with that, you should be able to see that a bit better now. So let's just see what is going on the whiteboard. And remember, you can use that chat window if you prefer. And Sundar's shared a link there to have a look at. So thank you very much for that. So if for some reason you can't see this, I'm going to read out everything on the whiteboard anyway. So let's have a look at what we've got. Starting at the top, somebody says, I'm going to read the ROI article you shared. Absolutely brilliant. It's actually a podcast. It's an audio track. But either way, really glad that you're looking at that. Somebody says, look at my problem-solving coaches, and how I'm going to prove return. That's an interesting one. Sundar, what do you think about somebody saying, they're going to look at their problem-solving coaches, and then what's the return on that? What advice can you give that person?
Well, I would say, if you've been able to identify them, I mean, just turn them into evangelists and, get them to share what they do really well with the larger organization. I mean, you clearly need more of those people, so.
Okay, thank you very much, Sundar. And Pam in the chat window says, we train coaches, mentors and trainers to come into organisations to talk about how to measure the impact of your learning, if you'd like a lunch and learn session for your senior leaders. So thank you for offering that, Pam. So back on the whiteboard, encourage people to really focus on their goals. I think that's been a key point that has come through the chat and the conversation throughout this morning's session. So Lizzie, what do you think about that focus on goals? Because I think you mentioned that right at the very beginning of our discussion.
Yeah, I think when you're really starting with anything, it's really trying to get to the heart of what's actually the need is, or the want, or the intention, and by allowing people to have a real focus on their goals. And so trying to get to the bottom of it really helps with that, and then taking the next step forward as to what happens next. So how can you do that? A really simple question is, what is it what could you do next to assist you to get progress? And encourage people to then focus on what's the priorities behind that. So what is it going to get you to achieve your goal, and how are you going to maintain that priority?
That sounds good, Lizzie. Thank you. And Pam, you said in the chat window to ensure that you have a strong contracting process in coaching. Tell us more about what the contracting process is. Pam, let me just unmute you there. Go ahead, Pam. Pam, are you there? So Pam, you might have a local mute button that you need to press, because we can't hear you at the moment. There we go. So Pam, you said about the contracting process. What is that?
Yeah, the contracting process is where you explicitly work with the coach to define the one or two core areas that you're going to use the coaching or mentoring to focus on. And you contract for it, you write it down, you review it, you come back to it. I know that, whenever you meet with your coach, you often deal with some of the things that have kind of emerged that week or that month, but always bring people back to the core thing that you've asked to kind of really get out of the coaching relationship, and ask in what way does the organisation and the context facilitate this happening, so that you can say, is now the right time for us to address this, and does circumstances and behaviours in the organisation facilitate you being able to have this? Because there's no point in working on something if actually there's no opportunity for you to pull it off.
Yeah. Thank you very much for explaining that, Pam. And back on the whiteboard, what else are we doing from today? Read some of the additional articles highlighted. Yes, and Sundar's just shared one about how at GlaxoSmithKline they create internal coaches. So thank you for that, Sundar. Richard says, I've learned how simple it is to link coaching objectives to business key performance indicators. Thank you, Richard. Really glad we could help with that. Somebody says, I'm pursuing this further by going on a coaching and mentoring course next week, which is absolutely brilliant. Somebody else says, encourage storytelling from our leaders to demonstrate the behaviours of coaching and linking coaching to our strategy. That was Jerome. That's a really great point. Thank you. Hannah's commenting about the KPIs. It's not simple, but possible. Okay, fair enough. On the whiteboard, somebody else said look at the resources and share with others. That's a key thing, as we get loads of great stuff here. And on Twitter, LinkedIn, internal email, your own networks, go and share those out. And lastly, on the whiteboard, put together an explanation of the benefits of coaching to improve performance in their organisation to present to a client. That sounds absolutely brilliant. And if anything you do here, you think actually, anything we do off of this, any small activity or big program, maybe other people would like to hear about it. So I've just shared in John's email address, our editor at TJ Online. So if you're thinking, actually, we've done something and we made a change, great to share it with other people. John would love to hear from you about sharing some of your stories. So let's hear from our speakers just for a last minute point about today. So let's come to Lizzie, then Pam, then Sundar. What is your kind of summary of the conversation today, Lizzie?
Be clear on where you're starting from. Don't assume that everyone else, just because everyone else is, it's a buzz, that you need to be doing it. So have a clear focus on what the reasons behind it, and then as you go through that, make sure the conversations, whether it's individuals or teams, have a focus, and the clarification of goals, which Pam's just referred to, is maintained. And as you go through that, which is what Sundar referred to as well, is making sure that you're continually going back to the context of what you're trying to achieve, whether it's a personal and or business goal, to make sure people are staying on track and achieving what they're wanting to achieve.
Thank you very much, Lizzie. And Pam, what's your summary from today's session?
I would say that you need to keep on advocating for the case for inquiry and coaching in the business, and you can never share enough examples of how people are using it. And an essential part of switching this on is that you have a strategic comms plan that's in place that gives people a million reasons to know that this is right and that this is the future of how we're going to be working in business.
Thank you, Pam. Absolutely brilliant. And Sundar, last of all, what's your kind of wrap-up thought summary from?
Yeah, I think there's enough research out there, and all the speakers have validated that it's coaching is great for individuals, teams, organizations. But I think what I'd like people to take away is also there's a clear systemic and cultural level benefit that coaching provides. So think of it as a lever that can actually allow your organization to transform and remain relevant in whatever business that you may be in. So that should be the hook that should get everybody started on
That's
the
absolutely
coaching journey.
brilliant. Thank you, Sundar, Lizzie, and Pam, for your kind of thoughts about that and your summary from today. Let's wrap up now. We're coming to the top of the hour. A huge thank you to Pam, Sundar, and Lizzie for all of your different thoughts, your take on things, your experience that you are bringing to this. And I'm just sharing in the chat window the websites, LinkedIn and Twitter handles of our speakers. Please keep in contact with them. They would love to hear more from you. And people are sharing details there already. And also, thank you to all of you guys. This discussion would not be what it is without you. As we say, the recording will always be available online. You'll be able to go and see that there later this week, so you'll be able to share that out with other people. You can continue the conversation on #TJwow on Twitter. So go and just share a couple of thoughts about what you got out of today, about what you hope to do a little bit more. And Helen says, thank you so much, my first TJ session. Oh, Helen, you are more than welcome. So pleased that you could be with us today. And we've got more of these coming up. We do one of these every month with great speakers like Lizzie, Pam and Sundar on different topics. Next month, we're talking about customer experience. Then in November, marketing L&D. In December, we're talking about learning to learn. And we'll also have a little special Christmas party in there as well. So do make sure that you come along to those. You can continue the conversation on Twitter and also on our LinkedIn group if you want to go and join that. So thank you very much, everybody. Oh yes, and we've got the 2nd of October as well, where we are talking about a whole area of sales as well, sales in learning and development. Thank you for reminding me about that, Hannah. So you've been absolutely brilliant, everybody. We hope to see you on the next one. Go and join us on Twitter or in LinkedIn, and we'll see you all soon.